So we'll just wait for the next slide. Brilliant. So our brand new teachers resource gives advice on overcoming common misconceptions. It provides language support for students who have English as an additional language, as well as background information, which explains the prior knowledge required for students to access the content of the chapter. The resource also provides ideas for your teaching, such as starter activity ideas and main teaching ideas, as well as suggestions on how to differentiate activities to support or challenge your students. And within the digital teachers resource, as I've mentioned, you have access to the digital workbook and the digital coursebook, as well as more downloadable materials as well. And we also have the workbook, and as I've mentioned, this has been fully updated to align to the same structure as the coursebook. And we have got several scaffolded activities, and this really supports student progression throughout the course. And students are allowed to download activity worksheets as well from Cambridge Go. So throughout the workbook, students can see where there are activities that they can go onto Cambridge Go, download activities such as this word search and crossword worksheets, and then complete them. The workbook also contains end of section practice questions, which includes the opportunity to evaluate sample answers and to apply advice to their own answers to different questions. We also have several professional development opportunities within Cambridge. This is for the Cambridge IGCSE Economics. And the best place to find what we have coming up in our professional development calendar is on our website, where you can filter by IGCSE and Economics to browse a list of upcoming courses. Please be aware that some of these will be more for the current syllabus, as this still has 2 more exam series to go. So the resources we're talking about today, that is for first assessment for 2027. But we will be adding new courses soon. On the slide, you can see some examples of the types of courses we have available. We have introduction courses, which are strongly recommended for teachers who are new to Cambridge or new to a specific qualification. Marking workshops enable teachers to engage with recent candidate responses to build confidence in their understanding of the assessment criteria. We also have focus on assessment courses for teachers who want to understand the assessment of the syllabus in greater depth, as well as focus on teaching, which are for teachers who wish to explore specific areas of teaching and learning within the syllabus. So an example here would be for focus on microeconomics or macroeconomics course. These courses are recommended for teachers with at least 1 year experience teaching Cambridge programmes. All of these different courses can be either online or face-to-face depending, so do always take a look at this before booking, or get in touch with us if you have any questions or you want to find out more about our professional development support. And I am now going to hand over to George. Thank you.
Hello, hi, my name is George Vlack-Nicholas, and my role today is just to, for the next 15 to 20 minutes, really just talk about the teacher's resource from my perspective as the author. So if we just go on to the next slide, please, Jen. Thank you. Brief outline of what I'm going to say. First of all, I will talk about my mindset, my views, as and when I was writing the resource, how I have interpreted the author's brief and what my intent is for you. And then finally, looking at 3 just different teaching ideas that are actually in the book and thinking about ways in which you might choose to use those ideas in your own teaching context. So first of all, just to give you a brief kind of background about who I am and where my expertise is coming from, I would say they come from really 3 main areas. Just like most of you, I am teacher of economics, and I have been a teacher of economics for the best part of 15 years now. Within that time, I've also been the head of department, so both large department and then currently relatively small department. It's also important to say at this point that my specific context is that I teach at an all-girls private school in the UK, which I know will be very different from many of your contexts. And the fact that we have very different contexts and very different students is something I'm going to come back to in a moment when I say that is one of the ways in which, or one of the things that I was thinking about at the forefront of my mind when authoring the teacher's resource. Secondly then, my expertise comes from assessment. I am the chair of examiners for a leading and exam board within the UK. It's important to say that that isn't Cambridge International, and there would have been, I think, a conflict of interest there. And I'm certainly not sitting in front of you today giving you any insight into what's coming up in the exam or any case studies. I don't know. I'm not part of the process. Like you, I have a specification in front of me, and I'm thinking about the best ways to tackle that specification in the classroom. I'm also a recent graduate of Cambridge University's Educational and Assessment course. And what both of these experiences bring, hopefully, is that there is quite a lot of assessment rigor going on to those teachers' resources, so that you can be confident that all of the teaching ideas within that teacher's resource come with a lot of assessment rigor, principles of assessment are being adhered to, and you can have confidence in those ideas. And then finally, teaching and learning. So having been head of department, I'm now assistant head teacher, teaching and learning for my schools, which means that I am responsible for the quality of education throughout the school. And I'm also the PGCE lead for economics, both with the University of Buckingham and the University of Southampton. PGCE means Postgraduate Certificate for Education. It is the teaching degree that trainee teachers in the UK have to study for. And so it's my privilege that I've been taking on a lot of new economics teachers into the profession and telling them about pedagogical rigor in our subject. So just to summarise those three, I hope that now presenting to you this teacher's resource, you will have some confidence that a lot of pedagogical rigour, a lot of assessment rigour has gone into the authorship of those resources. And also, with my experience in the classroom, I've got a good idea of what works and what motivates and engages those students. Next slide, please, Jim. So at the back of my mind, or rather I should say at the forefront of my mind when authoring resources, is the fact that we all have a different context. And looking at the different parts of the world that you're all in now, different time of day to me, it's just after lunchtime in the UK, but for many of you, it might actually be quite late in the evening, you've already finished school for the day, and others of you might be starting your morning. We all have very different contexts, both geographically, but also in terms of the sorts of students that are in front of you. I'm at an all-girls school, some of you will be at mixed schools, others of you will be at all-boys schools. So we have differences in terms of the gender of students in front of us. Some of you will be at inner city schools, others of you will be at rural areas. Some of you will be in very rich schools, which will have all the latest new equipment and devices and Wi-Fi that works perfectly around the school, and others won't. So it's my job, that's the challenge that I was given in authoring these resources, is how to make something that would be transformational for all of us. And really, at the back of my mind is, you don't really want to be told necessarily what you have to do in a very prescriptive sense, but really you want ideas of what to do in the classroom with regards to some of the teaching specifications. So I'm glad that in the teacher's resource we call them ideas. They are ideas. They are ideas for you to tweak and adjust accordingly. And that's how we get on to the second point then, please, Jen. The implied task for you with the teacher's resource is for you to look at my ideas and adjust them accordingly to suit your needs. And that might be that you don't necessarily love my case study. I know that they work with my students, but for some reason they might not land with your students. You can adjust that. I'm giving you permission to tweak and adjust the teaching ideas accordingly. Similarly, if I've decided that this activity for me might take 30 minutes, obviously that might not be true for your students. For example, you might have relatively weak class on a given day, and therefore you might need to spend a little bit more time teacher-led exposition at the front, in which case you might need longer time. Or equally, you might have some extremely able and ambitious students who want to talk more off-piste about extra conceptual ideas that are not necessarily aligned to the teaching idea, and therefore you might want to extend for that reason. Equally, I know how schools work. Time is everybody's biggest enemy. So therefore, you might need to contract a particular lesson. You might just need to just fit it into the 15 minutes that you've got left. I want you to adjust the timings accordingly as well. These are ideas. They're not prescriptions of what you have to do. So finally, just to summarize this slide up, and then we'll look at some actual activities. All of the time, all I've ever really wanted to do is to encourage teacher autonomy, to give you the agency, whilst at least giving you confidence that there is pedagogical integrity and assessment integrity to all of those teaching ideas that I've put into the resource. So let's take a look at one of those resources now. So this is just an example, one of three. This is a plenary idea, which means that it comes at the end of a topic, like an end of topic activity. In this case, it is a market and individual demand curve, part of the specification, which off the top of my head is something like 2.2.1 in the specification. And what I'm suggesting is that you could give your students a scenario, for example, that they're very hungry. Somebody is offering to sell them a snack. They should write down how much money they'd be willing and able to pay for that snack. Then to imagine after they've eaten that snack, how much they'd be willing and able to pay for the second, for the third, and the fourth. And you will know that this, therefore, is underpinning the idea or the principle of the law of diminishing marginal utility. But if you don't like my idea, I've seen this run in many, many different ways. I run this particular activity every single year for many different classes. But I've seen people do this in different ways. Maybe they actually give them the snack. So I've bought biscuits before, or Jaffa cakes or chocolates. I've got students to tell me how much they'd be willing to pay for a biscuit, then to eat the biscuit, then how much would they be willing to pay for the next biscuit and the third one. And that's worked really, really well as well. It adds an injection of fun, maybe on a Friday afternoon when they want a little bit of fun and an activity going about. In the second half of the activity then, you'll see that I'm getting to essentially take it on in groups of 3, and then think about how do we get a market demand curve from our individual demand curve data. Now, some of you might look at that and think, that's pretty tricky for my students. So you might decide instead to do a little bit of teacher exposition and just simply show them how to do it. Others of you might be looking at that and thinking there's an opportunity here to build in some IT skills. So for example, I've definitely seen this run before in terms of getting students to open up an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets or whatever the database software is that you use. And instead of using pens and paper, maybe you get the students to plot the market demand curve on a computer using IT software. Brilliant way to add that in. And then finally, just at the end of the assessment idea, I've put in some formative assessment. So not all assessment has to be summative. It doesn't have to be a test. The way in which I envisage this working is you set the students the task. You're then circulating around the room, having a look at what the students are doing, checking for understanding in the moment, and then making any corrections as and when they occur in that moment at the time. So really good assessment idea. It isn't just summative, high stakes, it's relatively low stakes formative assessment. Okay, we'll go on to the second one, please, Jen. Thank you. This then is price elasticity of demand. This is a main teaching idea rather than a plenary idea. So this would be right in the meat of that topic of price elasticity of demand, which is 2.6.1 on the specification. And what I've done here is just to outline 10 selected goods and services for your students to discuss. But of course, these are just 10 selected goods and services that I've chosen, that George has chosen. And of course, for you, if you feel that there are better goods and services that might be more appropriate for your context and your students and would inspire them, then of course you should feel free to change them. It doesn't have to be my choices. You can choose them. Now, the purpose of this particular activity is for high quality oracy. Oracy is one of those pedagogical tools that I've been thinking a lot about recently. So this is a great opportunity to essentially give your students a really good topic to discuss. If these products go up by 20% in price, what do you think will happen to the quantity demanded and why? How sensitive will they be and why? And if you look further down the activity, the real key, the high quality oracy bit comes in when you pit the groups against each other. So one of the groups might be arguing that a particular product is price elastic. One of the other groups might be arguing that the same product is price inelastic. And you are setting them up with a debate. You can structure the debate, and there are suggestions for how you might choose to do so within the activity. Having that oral debate, the dialogue between each other, I think this is a great way to deepen the understanding with regards to PED. And if we just go on to the differentiation and assessment activities for this, please, Jen, you'll see that every teaching idea comes with a differentiation idea. So if, for example, your students are struggling with it, there is a scaffolding approach, where in this case I'm saying, well, you might just have to get up at the board and explain to them why something like salt is price inelastic, why it's insensitive or unresponsive to price changes, before then giving the other 9 products to the students to discuss for themselves. On the other hand, if you have some very able students, very ambitious, or perhaps they're just getting through the activity pretty quickly, there's a challenge activity. In this case, you're encouraging students to argue the counterfactual. So, for example, they've already argued that salt is price inelastic. Can they come up with some reason, some argument that salt might, in some cases, be price elastic? And so when I've done this with my classes before, I've had brilliant responses in terms of students picking up on niche brands or niche types of salt, like Himalayan pink table salt, things like that, things I've never heard of before. And they're explaining to me that that's much more sensitive to price. Finally, then, there's another assessment idea. In this case, it's another formative assessment idea, checking in on the pairs, circulating around, seeing what they're discussing, and actually recording some of their dialogue so that we're having something to feed back to them in terms of their oracy and their level of oral articulation. Okay, we'll go on to the last one. So on to labour markets, bit of a gear change. This, I think, is 3.3.2 on the new specification. And like all good economics teachers, I'm always interested in bringing everything into diagrams. So this is another plenary idea. So this would come at the end of the topic on labour markets and wage determination. And the main idea here is to make great use of mini whiteboards. I'm a great proponent of mini whiteboards. I think they allow you to, or rather they allow the students to get a lot of private activity, not worried about whether anybody's checking necessarily, but everybody can do the work at the same time. You can circulate around and see what they're doing. You can do the big reveal in front of each other if you want. But again, I appreciate not everybody might have access to mini whiteboards. Some of you might have students that have their own iPads and they can do a digital mini whiteboard. Others of you don't have mini whiteboards at all, and therefore you might want to do this on pens and paper, but this is absolutely here for you to adjust accordingly. And again, my examples underneath are just my examples that hopefully will resonate with many of you, but if they don't, then feel free to change my examples to your examples. The principle of the plenary idea stays the same though, which is we're getting our students to draw diagrams, and that will lead to an assessment at the end. In this case, again, another formative assessment of you going around and circulating. They're not all formative assessments, by the way. There are some teaching ideas which have summative assessments at the end, so an exit ticket or a quick quiz or something like that. But I wanted to share this one to you for that last sentence there. This is a good example of a low-stakes formative assessment. If, like me, you have students that get quite anxious whenever you mention the word test or exam or mock, actually one of the things that you want to do is you want to reduce that level of anxiety by having something like a low-stakes formative assessment when they are doing it just in front of them, and it doesn't necessarily have to be shared with anybody else apart from the teacher. There are also some examples of no stakes, zero stakes assessment in the teacher's resource, where actually it's the student themselves that understands why or knows why or why they got something wrong or why they didn't get something completely correct. And you'll show them what the answer is, but it's for them to understand just for themselves. The mark doesn't go anywhere, it's just for them to understand what went wrong and make the adjustment for themselves. And that would fall into the bracket of metacognition, understanding where they are themselves on their journey and hopefully making the required steps for themselves. So it's really just me introducing what the teacher's resource is, how it's been structured, and what was at the forefront of my mind when I was authoring the various teaching ideas that you will see as part of that resource. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much to Annette, Julia and George for those fantastic presentations. It's very much appreciated. It's been really helpful to hear about all of the changes to the syllabus and the new updates to the teaching and learning resources as well, and to hear some teaching ideas and examples from George there, especially in terms of how you might adapt these activities to suit your teaching as well. So before we move on to the Q&A session, we would just like to share some links to register for our other upcoming webinars. So we've got one for IGCSE and O-level business, and also for Cambridge IGCSE and O-level accounting. And they will follow a similar format to this session, covering all the key changes and exciting updates for these two subjects. So we'll just grab the links for you, and we've got two options for business. These are taking place on the 19th of March at 8 a.m. and repeated at 1 p.m. And then the accounting webinar is on the 16th of April at 8 a.m. only. So I'm just adding the links into the chat there for those, as they might be helpful to you as well. And just a reminder again that we will be sharing all of these links in the follow-up email if you don't get a chance to grab them, along with the webinar recording and the slides, and you will receive this 7 days from today. So now we're just going to have a look at the Q&A box for our question and answer session. So as we're talking, please do continue to add any final questions into the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer these, as many as we can in the time that we have remaining. So let's take a look at what we have here. So we did have one question we noticed as well in the chat box was around the teacher's resource availability. So I think, I was just going to come to Julia for some clarification on where the teacher's resource will be accessible and how to purchase that.
Yes, thank you, Laura. So the teacher's resource from Cambridge, it is a paid-for resource and will be available from May, and you can contact your local sales representative for more information on that. But it is accessed via Cambridge Go. So this is different to the School Support Hub, where the resources on the School Support Hub are available to all Cambridge schools. But the teacher's resource that we've spoken about today, that is separate and available via Cambridge Go. And again, like I said, that will be available from May. And the same with the rest of our published endorsed resources. The course book, as I've mentioned, is publishing in 2 days' time. So on the 13th of March, that will become available. And again, the digital version is accessed via Cambridge Go, and the same for the workbook. And for those of you who would like to see samples beforehand, we will have executive preview in the next week or so. So please do contact your local representative if you do want to take a look at a couple of chapters from all three resources, and your local representative will be able to help you with that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Julia, for that. So we did have some other questions, a couple of different ones actually, but around similar things. So around topical questions for the classroom and another about differentiated worksheets. So I thought it might be worth just clarifying where teachers might find downloadable worksheets and differentiation ideas, because I think there might have been a little bit of confusion around what's where for that.
Yes, of course. And I'll let George probably answer some of this as well, as George is the one who did author a lot of this. So within the teacher's resource, we do have a lot of ideas for differentiation, and that includes downloadable worksheets as well. So the ideas for differentiation are for the students that need a bit more support, but also available for those who need a bit more challenge as well. But George, I don't know if you want to add anything to that as the author who wrote all of these ideas and the worksheets.
Sure, I was just trying to find the question. What does the question actually say, Laura?
So the question was just around if there are worksheets available and differentiation ideas in the resources and where to find them. So I think
so all of the main teaching ideas within the teacher's resource have differentiation ideas on both ends of the ability spectrum. So there are some scaffolding ideas for weaker students or students that are just struggling with this particular concept. And similarly, at the top end, highly able students or students that are just getting through the material quite quickly, there are some extension activities, challenge activities, which I think are suitable. But they certainly work with my students. Hopefully they'll work with your students. In terms of worksheets, the workbook is obviously where the worksheets are, but there's also a revision guide, isn't there, Julia, on the way? And the revision guide has plenty of worksheets for every unit of the specification too.
Perfect. That is really helpful. Julia, I don't know if you wanted to add anything additional about the exam preparation and practice resource as well.
Yes, so as George mentioned, we will have another resource that will be available, but not until next year. So from next year, we will also have the exam preparation and practice resource. And for those of you who might be teaching A-level, the A-level exam preparation and practice is available and has published, and the IGCSE will be along the same lines as what you get there. And George also authored the A-level one, so that will be available from next year, so in time for those taking the first assessment 2027. So it's four resources that we will be providing.
Perfect. George, did you want to add something to that as well?
Yeah, just on the Q&A, you're right, somebody did ask about topical MCQs and also support for EAL students. The course book has actually got 5 multiple choice questions for every single chapter. And then also this revision guide that is on the way next year will also have multiple choice questions bedded into those. I don't know if Julia might come in and say there are even more somewhere else in a moment, I don't know. In terms of EAL support, every single chapter in the teacher's resource has an EAL box. Well, it has, first of all, common misconceptions, but that's true for any student. And then it also has English as an additional language, where might the problems be for this particular component, and some suggestions, some ideas of how you might wish to tackle that within your classroom.
Thanks, George. And we do also within the course book have the key terms box with the key term definitions. So that will be really useful for those students who have English as an additional language. And we had a question in the last webinar we did about the video support and how that can support English as an additional language too, that a transcript would be available. And there's also subtitles for the videos as well. And again, you can pause at any time, speed things up if needed. The book and the teacher's resources. We did have a question from Barnabas in the chat, so I have just answered that.
Perfect, thank you. Just on the videos as well, perhaps you'd be able to just clarify again how we find the videos, and also how many are there? What kind of things do they cover as well?
Yes, thanks, Laura. So we have about 2 videos per section, and they are available within the course book on the digital course book. So your student can access that via Cambridge Go if they have the course book, and then they can find the videos that they want to watch on some of the more challenging topics. So the example that we used in this webinar was for the first section on scarcity. So it goes into depth about what scarcity is and some examples, as well as some questions for students to answer and talk about. And the videos are also accessed through the teacher's resource. So you can go in and take a look at them first, but it also comes with teacher support as well, specific for the videos. So when you might want to use them, if you're going to use them as a front of class resource, or when you might use them within your lessons, as well as some follow-up questions too. And I have just seen another question within the chat box about, again, the videos and captions. So yes, we do have subtitles and captions within the videos if you want to have them.
Perfect. Yeah, that's really good to hear. In terms of the accessibility for the videos, and also the EAL support in the textbooks as well is really helpful. And yeah, so that sounds good. We've also got a couple of questions again about the recorded version of the webinar. Just to confirm, yes, we will be sharing a recording of the session and the slides as well. So you'll be able to look back on those. You will receive this in the follow-up email, which goes out at least by 7 days after today. So you should have that by then. What else have we got? Just checking the Q&A box. We did get a few questions as well, and we had similarly questions on this morning in terms of when do these changes come into effect, and these changes are for first examination from 2027. So any exam series before that will be following the current version of the syllabus, and the changes that we've discussed today will be coming into effect from 2027. So just to be clear on that. Just going to have another look at the Q&A box. I think we've covered most things.
Laura, do you want me to tackle there's a couple of AI questions?
Yes.
We've tried to minimise, if not eliminate, AI from our kind of construction. And I've tried not to allude to it in many of the teaching resources either. The main reason being that, to be honest, we're all in very different countries. And because we're all in very different countries, we've all got very different access to different AI tools that are out there. So you won't find any teaching ideas that are asking you to use AI as part of your teaching, your classroom practice. Of course, these are all ideas and you should tweak them as you see fit. Somebody was asking for a recommendation of an AI bot. I mean, I can't in all good consciousness do that. Truthfully, I think what I would say about the resources that have been authored here is that they've been authored with plenty of expertise behind them, plenty of assessment rigor, plenty of pedagogical rigor, and therefore I'm confident in presenting to you. These are teaching ideas that work for me and hopefully work for you, your students, but you won't find any mention of AI in those teaching resources.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, it's a really obviously a very interesting topic area at the moment in terms of how it's impacting everybody's jobs, but especially in education, this is particularly significant. So it's good to hear your insights on that in terms of what we kind of are approaching our resources in that kind of area. So yeah, that's good to hear. I think Annette is also replying to some more questions in the chat, in the Q&A as well. But I think we've covered most of the main question areas, and hopefully if you do have other questions, you'll be able to find the answers in the various links that we're going to share in the email, or you can find the answers by looking back on the recording or the slides from the session today. So yeah, hopefully you'll be able to find the answers that you're looking for there. So yeah, that's just about all we have time for today. So thank you so much for attending the session, and we hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. And yeah, just to say again that we will be sharing the recording and the slides. So if you do have any further questions, then please refer back to this information, and also the links to various support on our website and supporting information that you can find there to answer any further questions you may have. You can also speak to your local team who will be more than happy to help as well. I'd like to say another huge thank you to Annette, George and Julia for their presentations, and also to Jen and the team as a whole for helping to put together this fantastic webinar today. When the webinar ends, you may see a short survey pop up to fill in, just to give us a bit of feedback on the session so we can continue to improve these for you going forward and provide the most useful information for you. And that's all there is really for me to say. Please do take a look at the other webinars that we have coming up, that hopefully they will provide information on the other syllabuses and resources, and that will be really helpful to you. So please do take a look at those. But thank you for joining us. Good luck with your teaching, and goodbye for now.